Morning, and firstly, my apologies. I chatted to someone last night who said 11 o'clock you were on. Yeah, so I was in the middle of a shower when I got a call to say, where the hell are you? You must bloody well pitch up, So those 3 extra double whiskies weren't a good idea when we got back after 2 bottles of wine. But anyway, it was a great evening. Thank you very much. Last night, I really enjoyed it. I was, asked to talk about winning teams and improving performance, which sounds as I know much about that, which I really don't. I know, I think I know about how to get a group of guys to play for each other and to play as best they possibly can. And I just want to talk about with all 3 teams that I've coached. The last 3 teams were South Africa in 97 to 2000, and then it was Stade Francais in Paris in 2003 to 2004, and then Italy in the last 4 years. I just thought the 3 key areas that you had to talk about. First of all, the whole teamwork thing is absolutely crucial. And teamwork's an easy word, but you've got to get the players to believe it. And in South Africa, the complicated thing in South Africa is we're very provincial. We're incredibly tribal. So if you were born in Cape Town, you'll always support the Stormers. If you were born in Pretoria, even though you might go and work in Joburg, you'll support the Bulls. Similarly with Durban, if you grew up at school, you'll always support the Sharks, even though you might be working somewhere else. So the difficulty for a national coach is getting, what makes it worse is that those teams play incredibly competitive rugby against each other. In fact, prior to us coming back into international rugby, having been isolated, those games were our test matches. So a Northern Transvaal game against Western Province was like, it was like the Boer War again. It was a really intense affair. I remember I played in one back in 1978 when Morne du Plessis tackled Nas Botha as he got the ball. And we were stuck in the changing room for 2 hours afterwards while 5,000 very angry Boers outside were wanting to bloody well blow the bus up. So the referee, a chap called Ian Gawley, he blew the game up 4 minutes early just so that he could blow it up when we were opposite the tunnel, so we could all run off as fast as we could. It was hairy times. And getting the team, but even when I took it over in 97, everyone thought South Africa after 95 was this fantastically united country. We'd won the World Cup. There'd been scenes of people dancing in the street. But in fact, the reality is never like that, is it? The next day, guys go back to work, they go back to Soweto or go back to Paris, and it was just that brief moment. And how did you have to, to try and maintain that or to keep the players to believe that they represented something much more than just a rugby team, that they represented the whole country, was quite difficult. I was just talking last night about the very first meeting I had. I got a guy from Human Resources from Fedshaw, actually. He came up, he was a mate of mine from St. Andrews. And I sat with him, and we spoke about how I wanted to run the team. And it had been very autocratically run before. It was a top-down sort of management style where the head coach was quite close to the administrators. And the head coach used to tell the players what to do. And it was very much them and us, And I was completely different in the way that I didn't get on very well with administrators, as you all will remember, and with the ticket price issue. And then I was quite keen that I could be as close to the players, in terms of getting to know them as possible, because I felt that they could really perform well if I did that. And we divided them into 6 groups. We divided English and Afrikaans guys up, and provincial blokes, really just backs and forwards, so that there was no comfort zone in any group. Sent them off into six different groups and asked them all the same questions about how they wanted to be coached, basically. What areas they wanted to control over, and what areas they wanted me to control. And 80%, or 90% even, of what I wanted came back from the players themselves. So before we even went on the tour, we had a tour where the players looked after minor disciplinary indiscretions. I would have been fined for coming late this morning, for example, and then the players would fine. There would be a fines committee. If guys didn't wear the right clothing, or they arrived late for practice, or if they didn't get onto the bus on time, the players wanted to sort that out. They didn't want a coach running up and down, shouting at the players and saying, "Why are you late?" They could sort that out. But they said over selection, that was something that they wanted me to take full control over. They wanted a bit of input into practices, when we had practices, what time we had practices, the length of time we had. So it was very much, I wanted them to feel that they were part of any success we managed to get. And I think that if you're going to get a teamwork, if you're going to get the team to play together and work together, they've got to really believe that you mean it. So, I was really pleased. We set off on our first game was against Italy, ironically. We were playing in Bologna. And we flew from Joburg to London, and then from London across. And we got it was an absolutely perfect flight. We got into our hotel in Bologna, and I'd said to them, 15 minutes later, it's never going to work, that, I'm afraid. This is just how I talk. Thank you for being very thoughtful, but... And so, I set off in the bus. Every guy has a number in your team, just to make it easier. You get alphabetically 1 to 36. And when you get into the bus, normaal asseblief, and they all start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or the whole team gets. So we got back into the bus 15 minutes after putting our luggage into the hotel, into our rooms. And I said, number, we were going off to a gym to have a swimmer and a cycle to get the travel out of our legs. And we got to 28, and there was no 29. So, I was a bit surprised. I said, who's rooming with him? And the guy put his hand up. So I said, well, we'll go and fetch him. So he said, no, I'm afraid, Coach, he's not feeling very well. He's quite sick. So I said, what do you mean he's quite sick? No, he says he's got travel sickness. So I thought, geez, that's odd. Doc, will you go up and have a chat to this guy and see what's going on? So Doc goes up there, and he comes back and he calls me off the bus. He said, I'm afraid it's not travel sickness. The guy is paralytically pissed. True story. Now, I've had this team for 10 days, and I said to them, one thing I said, if you come late for the bus or something but I mean, if you're in your Springbok blazer and you go out and, you behave in a way that lets your team down, I'm afraid, that is not something that you players can sort out. I'll sort that out. I'm going to send this guy. So I called Gary Tashman out, and I said, Gary, this isn't good enough. I don't know how this happened, but there's a player here who can't even come to our first swim session. We were all in our blazers. At London, I saw him in the London business lounge. He was fine. And suddenly, 2 hours later, he's completely pissed. He must have drunk the whole, liquor cabinet on the plane. So Gary said, listen, did anyone see him? So I said, well, it's irrelevant. I mean, he's pissed, isn't he? So he said, well, no, there were media guys on our bus. And he said, I don't think any of the media guys saw that he was drunk. So he said, can't we leave it for a couple of days? He's quite a good guy. He's made a mistake. We'll sort him out after the test match, but let's see if anything comes of it. And the media hadn't seen it, so I did leave it for a few days. It just went under the radar, and we played the test match. And afterwards, the new caps have to get up and introduce themselves and tell a joke and stuff. And at the end of doing all that, of giving guys their caps, Springbok caps, and including them into the group, and there's quite a sort of formal way in which the disciplinary committee does it. Now, it's interesting, the disciplinary committee, you won't, it's incredible, the players, what foresight they have. The chairman was James Small of the disciplinary committee, if you remember. Not someone that you would normally give a chairmanship of a disciplinary. His assistant was James Dalton. I'll say no more. I'm surprised he's not in prison at the moment. And Mark Andrews was the other one, So the three guys get up there, and they call number 29 up. And they said, listen, what you did was completely unacceptable. There were reasons behind it. The guy got into a drinking game with one of the players at the back. They just played a Currie Cup final, in fact, and it was between the two teams, Free State against Western Province. And this guy had gone to 3 Free State players who'd lost the game and had started mocking them about the game, and got himself into a bit of trouble with a drink, mainly because he made the stupid comment that alcohol has got nothing to do with getting drunk. This is what he said at the back of the plane. So the story goes, which I find hell of amusing, was he gets to the back of the plane and he says to these guys, bad luck, you guys played really well in the final. Now these guys are properly pissed off with him because he's got a big beck, and he came from Bethlehem anyway in the Free State and had gone down to... So he said, they said it was a good game and all that. So then they got chatting about the after party and how Western Province had celebrated. And he said, no, we had a great time. And he said most of the guys got pissed. And then this number 29 said, the interesting thing is that if I drink quite a lot, he said, I'll just go into the loo, look at myself in the mirror and say, yeah, is he pissed? You're not drunk. And if I talk to myself firmly enough, I'm fine. So the three players at the back were Rassie Erasmus, Werner Swanepoel, and Osturant. So they thought, this is really interesting. Air hostess, bring us some of those. And they had a couple of double down-downs with him at the back of the bus. And apparently one of the funniest things that they afterwards they realized they'd made a mistake because he was completely comatose. He found that alcohol did affect your bloody, oddly enough, it did affect. Anyway, what they did was they saw that he was trying to get into the loo at the back of the plane. It's a bloody narrow door. And he played prop, this guy. So he was trying to get in the door, putting his head around the corner, trying to tap the mirror to say he wasn't drunk. And then he just collapsed at the back. He'd had about 10 down-downs of vodka and whatever it was. So the players carried him off the plane. It was absolutely extraordinary how they managed to do it. They had one guy in the front holding his belt, two guys on the side holding the belt, another guy, and they walked really close together. And this guy's legs were just dragged on. And they walked him down the stairs. They walked him straight through all the they all put 5 passports on the passport table. Oh, our friend's fine, thanks. I just loved it. They got his baggage, got him onto the bus, got him up into his room. He'd actually really managed, sadly for him, he vomited on the front step. And Henry Honeyball ran downstairs with a bucket. I saw Henry throwing a bucket. I thought, hell, this guy's going beyond the call of duty to clean the bloody reception of the hotel. But he was trying to sort of get rid of the evidence. The interesting thing, that was the best teamwork I've ever seen in my life, how they managed to get. But you know what actually happened? They then actually fined the guy half his tour money. And then, guys are, especially those guys, they took 3 billiard cues. One guy got a billiard cue, turned it the wrong way around, and beat him 6. And they broke 2 billiard cues on his backside. They hit him so hard. So, there was a lot of discipline. I swear to God, no one, not even the management, wanted to have a drink after seeing that display. But interestingly enough, the players, it was just an example to show that if you do say something, now that wasn't, in fact, he'd gone into my area of discipline. But having said to Gary Teichmann and the players, listen, you sort it out. It made, Gary afterwards told me, it made a hell of an impact on them. They felt, listen, this isn't just words. Nick actually does want to know, from us, how we're going to play. I remember going there and said, what do you want to keep from the last coaches? They said, nothing. We want to change. We want to start afresh, So I'd go and then ask Henry Honeyball how, if he'd got any backline moves from Natal that he wanted to use, and from Western Province, a different guy. So in the end, the team really felt as though they owned their performance and were part and parcel of something which was which became quite successful. We won all 5 tests on that tour, and I think 4 by record-breaking margins. We beat France by 52 points in Paris, and beat England by 30-odd points, 29-10, I think it was, and beat Scotland 68 points. These were big scores for South Africa. And that was the start of a record-breaking run. So my belief with this team, with any team, is that you must be straight with them. First of all, show respect and tolerate differences. That was crucial in all 3 teams that I coached. You've got to show a lot of integrity. You can't say one thing to a player and another thing to a different one. Whether he's captain, whether he's your best player, right down to the guy who's the reserve, you've got to treat everyone equally. And players will spot it. They're well paid. They all want to play in the first team, the A team. They're incredibly competitive. So a guy who's on the bench is looking really carefully at the guy who's in his place, because he knows, that's my passport to making a lot of money. So if you favor that guy in any way, or if he does something that you've told the other guy that he's been dropped, or he's not playing because he misses tackles, or he hasn't got an 80-minute commitment, or he doesn't train hard enough, and you aren't equally vigilant with the other player, they'll pick up on you. So I think that with South Africa, it was getting that right, getting the English-Afrikaans blend, getting a good relationship with my captain, of course, until '99 when I didn't take him to the World Cup, and that I've said on a number of occasions that was my biggest mistake. And it was a big mistake because of the captaincy issue, not because of playing in South Africa. Excuse me. That is terrible. Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is, my alarm. Because no one phones me at this time in the morning. Sorry about that. And sorry, just with Gary Teichmann, in South Africa, because we do come from disparate cultures, especially after the World Cup, we had when there was a change of government, rugby had to become representative of the whole country. So we had a new national anthem, for example. We had to learn to sing a new national anthem, and And, I'm proud to say that the South African team that I coached was the first national team that sang it from the very first word go to the last. I got Nelson Mandela's secretary to come and teach these 6 teams separately, and then we had a competition, and the last team had to cook a supper, and the guys who came first won a round of golf or whatever it was, so made it competitive, and the guys all got up there and they sang the national. So anyone who was watching South Africa play saw a national team, whether it was predominantly white, was irrelevant. They were singing right from the start to the end the national anthem, and I think that was very important to explain to the players that they were playing in the number 8 position or the scrum off or the fly off position. But when you're playing for your country, you're borrowing that jersey for a brief period of time. And the way in which you perform adds value to that jersey. It's not yours. No player, who plays for the Springboks, it's not his jersey. It's actually the jersey that came from Gavi Vasagie. It's gone through Nas Botha. It's went through Jannie de Beer, then it went to Henry Honeyball. Now it's in the hand of Goosen. Someone else is going to get that jersey when you finish. So the only thing that matters is your ability to bring credit to this jersey during the time you're using it. And it's a really important lesson for rugby players to learn, because some guys who are intelligent get it and other guys don't, because they think that life will go on and you're important from the moment, just because you're in the media when you're a player. At the moment you're dropped, the media write about another player, and some people, especially some players, really struggle to come to terms with that. So the teamwork issue, I think, also involves being unselfish. And the next story I want to tell you is about Stade Francais. Most of you guys will remember Fabien Galtier. He was a very, very good scrum half. He captained France in the Six Nations, and was at Stade Francais when I went to coach Stade Francais. And he'd come up from Colomiers, a little club down in the south of France, because he wanted to win a national championship. He'd never won a club championship. So he decided to go and join a strong club. And I'd coached him in South Africa before. So when I got up there, I made him my captain because I trusted the guy. And we started the season really well. We won the first 6 games on the trot. We had a very good side. They hadn't done well the year before because they hadn't got the culture right in the team. That Stade Francais was a Paris club. It's the only first division club at that point north of the Loire Valley. Everything else was down south. The Agen, Toulouse, Toulon, all the top teams, Biarritz. Those teams played down south. And so Paris was a strange place to have a first division rugby side. It was only successful because we had a president who was way ahead of his time as a marketing guy, and decided to buy players. So he got players from the southwest of France, southeast of France, some Parisian players, South Africans. We had a Canadian, 2 Uruguayans. We had 3 Argentinians. It was really a very mixed up group of people, different cultures and languages. But and they'd come 6th and 8th in the last 2 seasons. But they were really good rugby players. And so there it was a question of just getting them together to playing for each other. And I thought that Fabien Galtier, as captain of France, would understand this. And the funny thing was, in the first 3 months, something wasn't going right. We were winning games, but it wasn't a happy team. You can sense it. You can really sense in a change room whether a team is united. After a win, the guys will hang around just that little bit longer. They'll have a beer. They'll have a chat. They aren't in a hurry to get out of the change room. When things are really tough, you see the team sticking together on defense. Guys will pick each other up off the ground. You'll see a bloke walking over to his mate and saying, come on, keep going. Even if you lose the game, you can sense that in that team there's a really good gees, a good spirit. And in the Stade Francais team, we were winning, but there wasn't the spirit. I knew we wouldn't win a championship. And part of the problem was Fabien, because he set such very high standards for himself that when a player made a mistake on the field, he would be very critical of that player. So, even though we'd won the game, if he didn't get the ball perfectly from a line-out, or some guy just messed up the move that he'd called, right in front of everyone, he'd say, that's just not acceptable. You're a professional rugby player. And if we lost, he would be the first to leave the change room as captain. First, he'd change, would not say a word to anyone and leave the room. So I knew it wasn't going to work, and he went off with France. And they won the Six Nations, and he was voted the best player in Europe. But he injured his arm in the last game. So when he came back, he was out for about 6 months. And while he was playing Six Nations, the second team scrum half came in. And we continued to win, but we won, really well. And the team was a much happier team. I'd given a lock the captaincy. And the scrum half was a guy who knew he wasn't as good as Fabian, but he really was so proud to be in the team that every single time the forwards did anything, he'd be thanking them. Thanks, guys. Well, there's a great ball. Well done. Fantastic scrum. Or great tackle. He was a really positive little guy. And the pack reacted and responded to him really well. So when Fabian phoned up after a month of being away, he phoned up and he said, listen, we'd got into the finals and they have playoffs in France where you play off for a semi-final place. And we'd won 3 of the games. We had to win 4 out of 6 to go to the semi-final. And our game was against Perpignan down in the south of France. And Fabian phoned me up on the Sunday after one of the games and said, listen, I'm available for selection. So I said, that's great. I said, you'll be starting from the bench. And there was silence on the other end of the line. And he said, I don't know if you heard me. I said, I'm fit. I'm available for selection. So I said, no, I heard that, Fabian, but the other guy's been playing really well. And I think that it's best for the team if you start on the bench. And while you're on the phone, I'm going to keep the captaincy. I'm going to keep with Bibi Ora do the lock because he's done a really good job. So he said immediately, listen, can I have a coffee? So I went and had a chat to him. And it was, excuse me, it was really interesting. He sat down and he was shaking his head, He just said, I can't understand this, Nick. He started off, you and I know each other. You knew I came up from Colombia, and I came up to win this championship medal. I haven't won a championship medal. I've just won 6 Nations. I've just been voted the best player in Europe. I can't understand why you're doing this to me. This is my only opportunity. I'm 32. I'm going to retire next year. And after about 5 minutes, I just stopped him and I said, just replay what you've just said there. Just think about what you've just said. There isn't a single word that you've said about your team. It's always, I came up from Colombia. I joined this club so I could get a medal. That I won the best player in Europe. I'm captain. I've never been dropped. I've never been dropped from a team in my life. Never once had he thought about his teammates. And I said, that is exactly the problem. And he went really quiet. It never happened to him. He'd never, ever not been captain of a team in his life. Under 9, he was captain of his under 9 team in France. The whole way through. He just couldn't understand it. And he said, this is going to be very humiliating for me, that I'm not picked. I'm available. Everyone knows So what do I say to the press? So I said, well, you work out what you're going to say to the press, but the most important thing is how you're going to behave towards your teammates. I said, I'm going to announce the team now, this afternoon, and I want you to go over to that scrum half. I want you to congratulate him in front of everyone, and I want you honestly to ask him to stay on, have a few kicks and passes after the game so that he feels that you back him for Saturday. And I tell you, it'll do yourself and your reputation a lot of good. And, being a bright guy, he did exactly that. He went to Jerome Filiol, who was a scrum half, and just congratulated him. I watched the team. As I announced Jerome Filiol 9, just 20 heads turned to look at Fabien Galtier to wonder how he was going to react. He kept his head down, had a great practice. He practiced the whole week. He did really well. As I said, he kept himself under the radar, didn't moan back to Jerome Filiol. We went and played the game, and the score was we were down about 14-12 with 20 minutes to go. And I got him on, and he played. He was really a very, very good rugby player. He organised our pack, and we did a driving maul that the forwards scored. And, he was there picking the forwards up, shaking their hand. Well done, fantastic effort. And then at the end of the game, he broke around the blind side, made about 50 meters, try-scoring pass. We won the game. And, everyone was really happy we got to the semi-final. And in the change room afterwards, Bibi Oradu came up to me when Fabian was in the shower. And he said, I said, well done, that was a great performance. Now we're in the semi-final. I think we're going to go all the way. And he said, we'll only go all the way if we play Fabian. And I said, yeah, no, he is better than Jerome, but I think Jerome's done a great job. He said, no, you're dead right. But if we want to win this championship, we need Fabien Galtier to be in the team. And I told Fabien about that, and it makes such a difference for a player if the rest of the team want him in the side. He immediately, he gave every single bit of himself in that semi-final and final, and we won both. We won 30 points to 15 and beat Toulouse 32 points to 10. And Fabien was absolutely outstanding. But it was because he had changed vaguely in relation to the players, and the players had noticed that he became more personable. He didn't moan about not being captain, and he realized that criticizing people all the time, doesn't make friends. It doesn't make you, friends with them, even though you might be right. So it was a real lesson for Fabien, and interestingly enough, he's become a really good coach. And that I think sums up rugby much more than anything else. That one individual player, even if he's the best player in the world, if he doesn't add value to your group in terms of your glass half empty, glass half full type of personality, if he's a glass half empty personality, moaning all the time about issues, don't pick him. And I try to do it mathematically. In selecting a team, 15 players, each one, because it's the greatest team sport of any, no person can do anything without the other person. No hook, prop needs his hooker. The hooker in the line-out, you've got to have your support. The hooker's got to throw it in perfectly. The scrum off, if he doesn't get good ball, he can't provide a decent pass to the fly, etc. The wing will never score the try unless all the various things have been done to create the opportunity for him to score. And on defense, it's even more important. If there's one guy who doesn't tackle in your team, you'll lose a game. You've got to have 15 guys who tackle and the guys who come on tackle. We just saw in the South African game what a terrible impact Grayling had when he came on the field. And one player can completely destroy a team by just doing a whole lot of repeatedly stupid things. And in rugby, between two players, there's never more than about 10%. So between Fabien Galtier or between this Jerome Filiol, there was only about 10% difference, 10, 15%. So if one guy's worth 1/15th, and between him and his next best player, there's only 10% difference to make it easier mathematically. Picking one player over another is a decision of 1/150th. Now, if you really go in saying, listen, I've got to play Dan Carter because he's the best player in the world. He is, but he's only the best player in the world if Dan Carter acknowledges that every other person in that team allows him to be such a good player. So it's that understanding of being part of a team in rugby that's so important. It's so important to when you get praise after the game. One thing I taught the players, that whenever they got a man of the match award, I hate it in rugby anyway, because it's always given to someone who scores a try or kicks the goals. I said immediately, you go up there and you thank every single player in the team who helped you play as well as you did. And Carter does it all the time. Carter gets 10 man of the match awards, and he's always saying, the forwards were absolutely fantastic. I couldn't have done what I did if I didn't have a great pass from Aaron Smith, whatever it is. And luckily outside me, I've got these magnificent centers, and they tell me what to do. He disperses praise to his team. And I think that's a crucial part of engendering this team spirit that I'm talking about. Quickly, integrity, which is another really important aspect of I think, coaching, but it's also really important about leading people. And I just want to quickly tell you a story about the 99 World Cup between when we went and we lost in the semi-final. They kicked a drop goal. It was we got knocked out to Australia, and Australia went on to win. The quarterfinal, we played against England. And we came up with a tactic against that English side who were very, very good on defense. They were the England side that went on to win the 2003 World Cup. It was exactly the same team. Wilkinson started his career that afternoon. He came on for Grayson. And the score was, before we'd seen how well England had played against the All Blacks, and we hadn't played particularly well, and probably the bookies were backing England in that game. But during the week, I was playing golf with the players on our day off, and a guy, Brendan Fenty, who's now coaching London Irish, was in the cart, and I was saying, geez, I don't know how we're going to score tries against England. Are really, really well organized on defense. They're a great side, and they've got a very good pack of forwards. So it's going to be really difficult for us, to get into situations where we can kick goals and score tries. And Brendan said to me, well, Nick, you'd understand Yanni de Beer, who I'd had to play fly-off because Henry Honeyball, my first choice fly-off, had torn his hamstring in the first captain's practice, so he was out. But he was just coming back in time for the quarterfinal, but he wasn't fit enough to start. So our tactics were different with Yanni. He was a kicking fly-off, and we weren't scoring tries with him, whereas Henry Honeyball was a very good defensive fly-off and also a very good attacking fly-off. So he said, what about getting Yanni to kick drops? And the whole tactic that day, against England, we kicked 5 drop goals, which remain a world record today. In fact, they wanted to change the laws after the game, especially the English bloody coach, Clive Woodward, because he was so pissed off that you could lose like that. But it's part and parcel of the rules. You know that a drop used to be 4 points and a try 3 points. It was considered more difficult to kick a field goal drop than it was to score a try back when rugby was, played as an amateur game in the old days. But those 15 points was the difference. We beat England 43-21 that day. And And at the end of the game, Yanni de Beer scored 32 points. He kicked penalties. He kicked those 15 points, the drops. And I got a tap on the shoulder, and Henry Honeyball said to me, "Coach, you can't change this team. You've got to take this team into the semi-final." And he was talking about himself because he knew that he was my first choice at fly-half, and he knew that he was fit now, and he knew that I wanted to pick him against Australia. And he just said, it wouldn't be fair on Yanni. You can't change this team. They deserve to play the semi-final. And I thought about it over the weekend, and then I thought, he's probably right. He's been out for these 4 weeks. Maybe if Yanni has another cracker and we win, it's going to be because of a kick. Funny enough, Yanni de Beer kicked a penalty right at the end of the game against Australia to allow us to go into extra time. And in extra time, he kicked a penalty. We were up 21-18. Then Australia came back 21-all, and then Larkham kicked a long-range drop, which he's never done in his life, and we lost the game. In the change room, we were bereft. You can imagine the guys are absolutely, your whole year has been planning towards the World Cup, and we thought we could make it, and we thought we were going to play the All Blacks in the final. Knocked out, chatted to the players, then went into the shower just to get away from them for a bit. And into the shower walked Yanni de Beer, and he came up, he shook my hand, he said, "Coach, I just want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to play the semi-final." He said, "I know it must have been very close, but I didn't tell him, I hadn't told anyone, not even Gary, what Henry Honeyball had said to me." And he said, to give me the chance to play the semi-final, he said, "No, we've got to play the third and fourth place playoff, which is on Thursday." And he said the players aren't going to get very motivated for that game because they're so, they were so focused on winning the World Cup that it's going to be hard to pick them up. But he said, I'd like to, drop myself, and I'd like you to pick Henry Honeyball for the game which turned out to be against the All Blacks because they got knocked out by France the next day." And he said an amazing thing. He said, I know this team well, and he said, if you make this a big game for Henry Honeyball, don't talk about the third and fourth place playoff. He said, talk about this as Henry Honeyball's last game in a Springbok jersey. And his only game at the World Cup. He'd never played in the World Cup before. He said, I think the team respect him so much that they'll really pull out the stops and they'll play well. And he was dead right, I put Henry in, and the team, I sent them all away for 3 days. Some of them went over to Europe, and poor old the New Zealanders, they trained morning, afternoon. I came back on the Wednesday. I said, you've got to be back in the hotel on Wednesday morning. So I gave them off Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because we'd been together for all this time. We had one captain's run, and we beat the All Blacks 25. I mean, we should have beaten them by 30 points. We beat them 25-12, and they fired John Hart, and I saved my job, actually, thanks to an incredibly unselfish gesture from two people. Now, what other sport would you get a player? No, certainly not soccer. I very much doubt cricket, that a player will come to a coach and say, for the betterment of the team, for the good of the team, I think you should pick, Henry Honeyball said it about Yanni de Beer, and a week later, Yanni de Beer said it about Henry Honeyball. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And to be part of a group who behave like that, I thought, that you've achieved what you wanted when you set out. You've achieved guys who cared for each other. They cared for the team, the performance of the team, more than they cared about personal records. Henry Honeyball might never have played a game at a World Cup had Yanni de Beer not said, listen, I think you should pick him ahead of me. So, fantastic behavior from these guys, but which demonstrates, I think, what I was talking about, the unselfishness, respect for other people, and how you play, and you better, or the way you behave improves the performance of your team. My last little anecdote, see, I've got 10 minutes, is just about Italy. Because it sounds all good, I coached South Africa and we won a lot of games, and coached Stade Francais and we won 2 championships. Then you go and coach Italy. Now that's not quite the same. Because Italy, the Italian mothers, first of all, don't want their sons to play rugby. It's far too dangerous. And mothers run families in Italy. So, the father might vaguely think his son, but the mother says absolutely not. So there are very few rugby players. There are only 60,000 rugby players in Italy. There are 100,000 rugby players in the Western Cape alone, So you're playing in the Six Nations, selecting from the southern suburbs, basically. That's what Italy's like. And when I took them, their World Cup performance in 2007, they'd lost 78 points to 10 against the All Blacks, They just ran on. They were like rabbits in the headlights, And they'd taken over 50 points against France, 60 points against England. When I coached South Africa 10 years before, we beat them 101-0. In fact, 101-0, which remains a world record, until they then lost to New Zealand 101-0 in the World Cup. So we share that record with New Zealand, in fact, not one that I'm too proud of. But Italy rugby is not the strongest, it's not the sport that they would go out and boast about. So unfortunately, I took the job, and we're in the Six Nations, and you have to play. You've got to play France, England. You've got to play against Ireland, Wales, and Scotland every year. And at that time, we had Southern Hemisphere tours. We were part of the Six Nations. So my first tour was 2 tests against South Africa. The next year, we played Australia away, New Zealand away. And my last year, we played 2 tests, one against Argentina and one against South Africa. So, out of 40 games, I played 38 games against the Six Nations countries and the best 3 teams in the world. So it was really, really tough. We won 10 out of those 40 games, which was extraordinary, in that we were never better than the teams we were playing against. We just happened to be luckily scrape a win every now and again. But I went through a really bad patch. I'd lost 5 in a row in the Six Nations, and I'd lost 2 in the November test. So I was on a losing streak of 7. And we were going, in my second year, down to Australia. And I was really worried about the team. I thought that a lot of them would pull out. A lot of them would say, no, we're not coming on this tour, because it was impossible to win. You weren't going to go to Australia with an Italian side that had lost to Scotland and go and beat Australia away. So we had the meeting, and the players were looking a bit down. They'd been selected, and they knew they had to go if they were going to earn their money. And so I thought I'd better sort of come up with some sort of reasonable target goal for them, so that we could rate their performance. And I said to them, guys, we're going to lose all 3 games on this tour. There's no question about that. We have got no chance of winning a game. I opened with that, which surprises sportsmen, because usually coaches say to them, if we really play hard and tackle and kick it in the corner and take our chances and all that crap, we can win, which was, it was totally bullshit. We could do all that and we'd still lose. So I thought it was better to tell them that, So I said, but we're going to have a good tour. I said, we're going to enjoy ourselves. I said, there are 30 of us. Against Australia, the first test, I'm going to pick a sort of mixed team. And then the second test, another mixed team. And then I'm going to pick the best team against New Zealand. Trying to make it a little bit competitive amongst ourselves. What they didn't know was I only had 4 good players. I only had Sergio Parise, Castro Giovanni. So I could change, 11 players, and it made bugger all difference to my team. But amongst themselves, they thought, oh, shit, I might have a chance of being in the A team. Meanwhile, they were all C team players. And so we go there. So I said, listen, there are 2 ways you can lose. You go overseas on this sort of tour. You lose the first game 50 points to 0. Second game, you lose by 70. Then you go and play against the All Blacks, and you lose by 80 or 90. I said, they can score 30 points in 10 minutes, that team. So, and I said, if that happens, 2 things. You can't look at them in the eye, because you've lost all respect. They won't respect you as rugby players, and they won't respect you as people either, because they'll see that you don't give a stuff, that you don't care. And secondly, you can't look at each other. You're in a change room, you've lost, you will be looking at your shoes as you walk out there, because no one will look at each other in the eye. You can't possibly lose by that amount and say to each other, honestly, we tried hard. So I said, that's unacceptable. We're not going to go overseas and do that. But I said, I reckon that if we concede less than 100 points in 3 games, I think it'll be a great tour. That's 33 points per game against Australia. South Africa had lost by 40 points. France took 50 against Australia that year. So it was, even that was, quite a tough call. But I said, if we lose 30 points to 10, around about 30 points to 10 in these 3 games, we'll have had a fantastic tour. Then your opposition will shake your hand, because that's a tough game. 30. They'll have scored 3 tries, you score 1. You'll have been competitive for 80 minutes, and you'll be able to look at each other in the eye when you walk out. And I can assure you, in New Zealand, they're a rugby-mad country. They'll respect you. They'll respect you if you perform like that. I didn't believe it myself. I was talking a lot of caca. I just thought, but I said, I've got to make these guys go on tour, at least to try something. So we go on tour, and I say to Sergio, we're going to play a very defensive game. If you think the Bulls rugby is defensive, you should have seen Italy. I hold the world record for the longest scrum. 7.5 minutes, 23 resets, 7 penalties, 1 yellow card. It was our ball against the All Blacks. As I was sitting there, I was looking at my watch. I was saying, 1 minute gone, another minute gone, another minute gone. They haven't got the ball. They can't score a try. We've got it. We put it in. we were quite good in the scrum, I must admit. We had a good scrum. So we wanted to scrum the whole game. We didn't really want to pass the ball much. If we could just start off with a scrum and then go from a line-out into a maul, which turned into a scrum, we'd be really happy, And then I put a good defensive organization. Our fastest guy ran the 100 meters in 11.6. I mean, shit, I think, Ralph, you would have run much faster than that yourself, I'm sure. So we couldn't pass the ball. They had Joe Rokokoko, Sivavatu, Nonu, Carter. So the teams we were playing against were really good rugby sides. So I said, listen, what we've got to do is we've got to have a really good defensive game, slow the game down as much as possible, turn it into a wrestling match, and hold the ball. Hold it as long as we can. I mean, even if there's a maul that goes only half an inch forward, keep it just for as long as that's 30 seconds, and then put it on the ground and pick it up and pass to another guy who then had another maul. We just to try not to allow the opposition to just get the ball. So we go and play Australia. First game, couldn't believe it. 34 points to 11. We're sort of vaguely in amongst. They scored 4 tries. We scored a very good try. And I'm really happy. So I go back into the change room. Well done. As promised, 11 changes for the next week. The guy said, shit, don't you think that's doing too much? I knew it made no difference, And go and play Australia the second test. Luckily, Robbie Deans also made some changes. And the score's 30-8. We lose the next one by a very similar margin. I can't believe it. 2 weekends against Australia. And, we've conceded in the 30 points to 10. We go and play the last test. This is against an all-black team with everyone. Only guy missing was Dan Carter. They had Richie McCall. They had the Franks brothers and Whitelocks and all those guys. And a great backline. Israel Dag played his first test that day. And I just knew today, the bubble was going to burst. It wasn't possible. It just wasn't possible for us to be lucky as that 3 times in a row. But anyway, kept on saying, if we can keep it to around a couple of tries and 3 tries, and we managed to get a couple of penalties, you never know, we can keep it to 30 points to 10. Bugger me, half-time, 14 points to 6 against the All Blacks in Christchurch. I'm sitting up there, I can't believe it myself. I mean, they've dropped with the ball with 2 open lines. We've tackled ourselves into a coma. The guys, I can't believe how well they've done. I'm absolutely delighted. I'm up in the coaching box. It's 2 minutes to get down to the change room. So I get down in the change room. I burst the door, swing open. I wanted now to say, guys, fantastic. They're in a circle. And in the middle of the circle is a guy, Toto Perugini. He's my Lucid prop, who hadn't said a word for about 4 years. So I was very surprised that he was chatting. So I just thought I'd leave him. And he was saying, he was looking at everyone. He said, and he was saying things like, I know where you live. I know where your mother lives. I know where your daughter goes to school. If any one of you miss a tackle in the second half, I will personally, I'm part of the mafia. I come from Napoli. I will send people to kill your children. Shit, I thought this is pretty hot stuff. I promise you. He said, I've never thought, and honestly, he said, I never thought I'd ever wear an Italian jersey and ever be in a situation where we were playing the All Blacks and we'd be 14-6 at halftime. And he said, it can slip just like that. In 10 minutes, in 5 minutes, they can score 2 tries, and it's all gone. And he was just saying to them, this was the proudest moment of his life. I didn't say anything, not one single word in that change room. I opened the door, heard him talk, opened the door for the team, said, well done, guys, off you go. Went up to the change room. I thought, shit, they're really into this game. We played it. We just kept at it. They eventually scored another 2 tries. The score was 28-6 at the end of the game. So they scored 2 more tries in the second half. But I couldn't believe it. We'd held them till below 30 points. The All Blacks, they'd only scored 3 tries against us. And in reunion, there's a reunion which is their sort of Boost and All program in New Zealand. And they had the coaches box of the Italian coaches box, and then they had the All Black coaches box, and they put them together. And underneath they said, who do you think won the game? And in the Italian coaching, I'm kissing my buddy, well done, high-fiving my manager and hugging everyone. And in the other one, Graham Henry shaking his head. Can't fucking believe a guy's going like that. And, there was all quiet. They just, and underneath they put the score, New Zealand 28, Italy 6. And I was absolutely delighted. So I go back into the change room. I mean, it really was an extraordinary performance. That's probably a better performance than beating France, because New Zealand, I have so much respect for them, and they can just cut you apart. So our guys had done everything and more that I ever could have asked of them. And in the change room, having congratulated every single guy, I got to Toto and I said, Toto, geez, I can't believe it. That was the most inspirational speech I've ever heard. Where did that come from? And he was looking a bit sheepish. So he said to me, well, remember that talk you gave us before we left, where you said you hoped that we'd keep it to less than 100 points? He said, well, I went to a bookmaker and I put €1,000. True story. 20-1. He made €20,000, the bastard, on that result. So there I was thinking, teamwork and motivation, cuck, it's all financial. Pay the guys more and then I'll be really happy. That's about it. Yeah. So if I, just to sum up, I'm really lucky. I've had a fantastic job. I absolutely loved what I did. Coached a national side like South Africa to, at one point, being the best in the world. Coached Stade Francais to winning 2 French championships and lived in France for 12 years and learned to speak French and learned to speak Italian and lived in Italy. But as I said right at the beginning, it's not about anything else except for people, enjoying people and enjoying working with them and enjoying motivating them. And that's what I think, I've really, as I said, been privileged and I love doing. Thanks very much.